Mistress destroyed, pregnant wife's baby shower, millionaire saw, everything. Silver confetti shimmered beneath the grand chandelier of the Four Seasons Hotel in Beverly Hills, reflecting the radiant glow a mother-to-be who believed this day would be filled with love and celebration. Friends and family gathered around, eager to shower her with affection and gifts, completely unaware that a storm of secrets and betrayal was about to erupt. Amid the joyful music and endless chatter, a mysterious stranger slinked along the walls, determined to destroy the very event meant to honor new life. And hidden among the guests was a wealthy onlooker, an unintended witness to a scandal that would shake everyone present. Clarissa Meyer considered herself one of the luckiest women in Los Angeles. She was glowing, almost 8 months pregnant, and deeply in love with her husband, Daniel Meyer, a self-made millionaire who'd risen from a modest background. Tall and polished, Daniel carried an air of confidence that came from hard work rather than entitlement. He owned a thriving chain of upscale restaurants across Southern California and was known in social circles for his business acumen as well as his devotion to Clarissa. He was used to the limelight, but always managed to shine it on his wife and family, rather than revel in it himself. Although Clarissa was initially suspicious of fame and wealth, having come from a family that struggled to pay bills each month, she soon learned that Daniel's heart was as large as his bank account. He made it his mission to prove to her that money didn't have to corrupt one's spirit. In their early days of dating, he brought her to soup kitchens he funded, took her to meet staff at his restaurants, and introduced her to local charities he supported. She saw firsthand that he was not merely throwing money at problems, he was personally invested in making people's lives better. When Clarissa and Daniel decided to start a family, they approached it with both excitement and trepidation. Clarissa had always longed for motherhood, but she was aware that her new life in Daniel's opulent world came with pressures. She now floated through grand galas and exclusive events, learning to navigate conversations with celebrities and politicians. Some of those individuals were genuine, others whispered behind her back, questioning if she was truly worthy of Daniel. Yet for the most part, Clarissa felt accepted. She chose to see the best in people, focusing on Daniel's unwavering support and the promise of the little life growing inside her. By her 8th month of pregnancy, they decided to host a lavish baby shower. Daniel spared no expense. He arranged for the event to be held at the Four Seasons Hotel in Beverly Hills, a real place that had seen countless movie stars and business moguls gather for high-profile gatherings. Clarissa had initially argued for a simpler location, perhaps one of her favorite local parks or a cozy backyard affair, but Daniel wanted to celebrate her properly. He insisted that Clarissa, who was carrying his future heir, deserved every ounce of lavish love he could provide. After some convincing, Clarissa agreed to the grandeur. She thought, maybe it'll be fun to have a fairy tale moment. The hotel staff, used to hosting VIPs, started planning everything: pastel-colored floral arrangements, an elaborate dessert buffet that stretched along one side of the ballroom, and tables draped in linen so soft it felt like clouds. A custom ice sculpture of a teddy bear was even commissioned. Clarissa's mother, Harriet, cried tears of joy each time a new detail was mentioned. This baby wasn't just a blessing for Clarissa and Daniel. Harriet saw it as the family's symbol of hope. She was bursting with pride to see her daughter so happy and provided for. Yet, beneath the layers of glitz and maternal joy, an undercurrent of tension had begun swirling. Whispers passed through the staff in Daniel's restaurants, little rumors about a striking new hostess who had spent extra time in Daniel's private office. Clarissa's best friend, Melody, confided that she once saw Daniel lunching with this hostess at an upscale bistro, just the two of them, their heads leaning in close. When Clarissa tried to broach the subject with her husband, Daniel brushed it off as a business meeting, claiming he was evaluating certain staff members' potential for promotion. He had always tried to identify hidden talent and mentor promising employees, especially those from humble beginnings. He saw them as reflections of his younger self, hungry for a chance. Because Clarissa had always trusted Daniel, she put her mind at ease, albeit with a small twinge of uncertainty. At nearly 8 months pregnant, she told herself that Daniel's main priority was her and the baby. He was simply being his benevolent self, or so she prayed. She was too busy preparing for motherhood, scheduling hospital tours, and dealing with swollen feet to dwell on half-formed suspicions. She wanted to believe their love was unbreakable. Veronica Cole, a sultry brunette with a magnetic gaze, had recently been hired as a hostess at one of Daniel's upscale restaurants. She was admired for her polished composure, impeccable style, and ability to sweet-talk even the snootiest clientele. However, behind her captivating facade lay an ambition that burned hotter than any typical career goals. Veronica didn't want to just climb the ladder. She wanted to take the entire building for herself. Over the years, she had learned the art of manipulation. She excelled at flirting with powerful men and planting seeds of doubt in the minds of those around them. She had set her sights on Daniel Meyer the moment she'd heard about his background: young, charming, and extremely wealthy. She found subtle excuses to linger by his office, offering him coffee when he was occupied by a meeting, or greeting him after hours, claiming she was staying late to balance spreadsheets the manager had asked her to handle. At first, Daniel paid little attention to her. He might have found her competent, but he was far more interested in returning home to his pregnant wife, who always awaited him with that open, welcoming smile. But Veronica was patient. She'd been spurned before, and it only refined her tactics. She developed a routine, working tireless shifts, acting devoted and polite to everyone. Soon enough, she charmed the entire restaurant staff. People rooted for her, admired her perseverance, and even told Daniel stories of how Veronica stayed late to help with closing duties. Eventually, Daniel took notice. Impressed by her dedication, he asked Veronica to meet him for lunch, purely to discuss how he might support her professional growth. Or so he told himself. She feigned surprise, then gratitude. When he suggested the upscale bistro, she suggested somewhere more discreet, better to keep business matters private, she insisted. Daniel, always looking out for his employees, agreed. Though the lunch was intended to talk about a potential manager-in-training program, Veronica skillfully shifted the subject to Daniel himself, his achievements, his philanthropic work, his personal life. She used every social cue in the book, leaning forward, tilting her head attentively, providing the perfect balance of admiration and curiosity. Daniel, while faithful in his heart, couldn't help but feel flattered by the attention. Clarissa, heavily pregnant, was at home dealing with mood swings and physical discomfort. Veronica offered an escape, a reminder of who he was before the responsibilities of fatherhood consumed him. One lunch became 2, then 3. Daniel found himself comforting Veronica when she cried about her rent being raised, offering solutions, writing reference letters to help her find a more affordable apartment. He told himself he was being kind, but in reality, he was dancing on a dangerous line. Veronica's tears, like her smiles, were weaponized. She measured every tear carefully. She was aware that Clarissa existed, but in her mind, Clarissa was simply an obstacle. With Daniel's baby on the way, it was more urgent than ever for Veronica to stake her claim. She wasn't aiming to be another fling. She wanted to unseat the rightful queen and claim the throne for herself. The day Clarissa's baby shower was announced, news traveled swiftly through Daniel's business empire. Invitations spread to a network of entrepreneurs, celebrities, socialites, and close personal friends. Chefs and servers in his restaurants whispered excitedly about the glamorous event, and managers scrambled to rearrange schedules so key staff could attend. Clarissa was widely admired, and many people genuinely wanted to celebrate her big day. Veronica heard these whispers and pretended to be delighted for Clarissa, even congratulating her in person at one point. But beneath that practiced smile, Veronica felt her heart surge with resentment. She couldn't stand the idea that Clarissa, who had done little other than marry into wealth as she saw it, would bask in all this attention. In Veronica's mind, Clarissa had never worked a day in her life. Veronica had meticulously studied Clarissa's background, her modest upbringing, her college years, her volunteer work. None of it impressed Veronica. All she could see was the pregnant woman with a diamond ring that glowed like a small sun on her finger. The more Veronica raged in private, the more she fixated on a plan. She decided if Clarissa was about to receive her perfect day, Veronica would be there to destroy it. She wanted to not only sabotage the shower, but also publicly claim her place in Daniel's life. The notion of Daniel's child being welcomed into the world overshadowed her own ambitions. She'd heard rumors that Clarissa was carrying a son, an heir to the Meyer fortune. Veronica saw that future as rightfully hers. And if Daniel wouldn't break the news to Clarissa that he had grown feelings elsewhere, well, she'd break it for him at the baby shower. Preparations for the baby shower went on for weeks. Clarissa's mother, Harriet, arrived in Los Angeles a month in advance to help finalize details. Harriet and Clarissa spent days sampling cakes, selecting pastel color themes, and mailing out personalized invitations. They giggled at the memory of Clarissa's childhood, how Harriet struggled to afford a decent birthday cake when times were tough, and now they were ordering a multi-tiered confection that looked too beautiful to eat. Daniel, busier than ever, did his best to check in on the plans, but in the background, Veronica tugged at his attention like a magnet pulling metal. She'd show up, unannounced, teary-eyed, claiming another crisis. She made certain that Daniel gave her a ride home after late-night meetings, insisting it was unsafe to travel alone at night. Each time, she built a small sense of intimacy, complaining about the heartbreaks she'd suffered. She painted herself as a lonely soul in need of a savior. Daniel tried to keep firm boundaries, but each day his moral lines blurred a little more. Clarissa noticed he seemed more distracted. He came home with a furrowed brow, often checking his phone. When she asked, he brushed it off as business stress, expansions, new restaurant openings, competitor issues. Clarissa, wanting to be supportive, didn't press him further. She knew running a restaurant empire was no small feat. She didn't want to be the nagging wife, especially when she herself was near the final stretch of pregnancy. Even though alarm bells chimed in her mind, she hoped she was merely imagining trouble. The baby shower date finally arrived. The Four Seasons Hotel's grand ballroom was transformed into a wonderland. Tables were draped in pale pink and white linens, vases overflowed with peonies and roses, and the sweet smell of vanilla cupcakes wafted through the air. A lavish gift table groaned under the weight of neatly wrapped presents. The guest list included everyone from Daniel's business associates, Clarissa's longtime friends, neighbors from their gated community, Harriet's circle from her hometown, and even a handful of top staff from Daniel's restaurants. A small jazz ensemble played softly in the corner, setting a mellow, sophisticated tone. Servers in crisp attire glided through the room with trays of sparkling cider and hors d'oeuvre. Clarissa, adorned in a flowing pastel dress that hugged her pregnant belly, glowed with happiness. Harriet, wearing a proud grin, introduced herself to every guest, gushing about her soon-to-arrive grandchild. Daniel hovered near Clarissa, greeting well-wishers and making sure she felt comfortable. Unbeknownst to Clarissa, a storm was brewing in a nearby corridor. Veronica had managed to secure a black cocktail dress that fit her figure like a glove. She was not on the guest list, yet she breezed past the check-in table with the confidence of someone who belonged. Staff members recognized her from Daniel's restaurants, assuming she'd been personally invited by the boss. She floated through the ballroom doors, scanning the crowd like a seasoned hunter looking for prey. The baby shower was in full swing, laughter echoing in every corner as Clarissa and Harriet tried to guess the flavors of baby food in a light-hearted game. Daniel was in the midst of a conversation with a business associate about a potential overseas expansion. Everyone was so immersed in the cheerful ambience that no one paid immediate attention to Veronica, but gradually heads began to turn. Some recognized her from the restaurants and whispered questions about her presence. Others noticed the way her eyes locked onto Daniel, brimming with confidence. It was Harriet who first sensed the tension. She saw Veronica prowling toward Clarissa, her posture radiating hostility. Harriet quickly stepped forward to intercept her. She had no idea who the woman was, but sensed danger. Veronica flashed a venomous smile and breezed right past Harriet, heading straight for the mother-to-be. Clarissa looked up from unwrapping a tiny pair of baby socks when she felt a pair of cold eyes upon her. Veronica stood there, arms folded, lips curved in a cruel grin. The room went uncomfortably silent, all eyes flicking between Clarissa, Veronica, and Daniel. "Hello, Clarissa," Veronica purred, her voice dripping with faux politeness. "Congratulations on the baby. It must be thrilling to celebrate so publicly, knowing you have, let's just say, competition." Clarissa blinked in confusion. I'm sorry. Do I know you?" In that moment, Daniel spotted Veronica and turned pale. He excused himself from his colleague and quickly approached, placing himself between Veronica and Clarissa. Harriet, who had inched closer, felt her stomach twist. The hush that descended over the party was nearly suffocating. Veronica seized the opportunity. In a voice loud enough to be heard by the entire gathering, she announced, "Clarissa, I'm Veronica Cole Daniels' employee, friend, and so much more. I'm here because I believe honesty is the best gift to bring to a baby shower." She turned her gaze to Daniel, her brow arched expectantly, as though daring him to contradict her. Clarissa's heart hammered in her chest. She glanced at Daniel, silently pleading for an explanation. Guests awkwardly looked down or exchanged bewildered glances. Harriet found herself stepping closer, her maternal instincts screaming that something was about to go very wrong. "Veronica," Daniel said in a tight voice, "this is neither the time nor the place. Leave now." But Veronica wouldn't be dismissed so easily. "Really, Daniel, have you told Clarissa about those late nights at my apartment? About the times you confessed how suffocated you felt by impending fatherhood?" She raised her voice a notch. "Did you tell your wife how you worried that she wouldn't be as exciting once the baby arrived?" A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Clarissa's eyes widened, tears of disbelief forming. Harriet stepped beside her daughter, one arm protectively around her shoulders, glaring daggers at Veronica. But the mistress wasn't finished. "I believed in you," Veronica went on, her voice trembling with feigned hurt. "I offered you solace when your pregnant wife was too tired and moody to care about your needs." She softened her tone to sound almost pitiful. "Daniel, I thought we had something real. Aren't you going to stand by me now?" Guests started whispering frantically. A few even pulled out their phones, discreetly filming or snapping pictures. This was a scandal that no one in that circle would soon forget. Clarissa felt her world collapsing. She glanced up at Daniel, desperately seeking denial or reassurance, anything to refute this horrible claim. Clarissa's eyes welled with tears. The once vibrant glow on her face turned to ashen shock. Daniel, breathing heavily, tried to grasp Clarissa's hand, but she recoiled. Harriet held her daughter tight, her expression a mix of anger and heartbreak. "It's not true," Daniel managed, voice shaking. He turned to Clarissa. "Clarissa, you know me. I would never Veronica barked a bitter laugh. Never! How dare you lie! She produced her phone and flashed the screen. Texts from you, photos, hotel receipts. Or should I show the charges for dinner reservations where we had our little private rendezvous? Daniel's eyes flitted to the phone in dread. He knew, with a sinking feeling, that there had been lunches and dinners, discreet times he'd stepped over a line he swore he'd never cross. But had it really gone so far as to be considered a full-blown affair? Clarissa's gaze flickered with betrayal as she saw his hesitation. "Tell me this is a misunderstanding," Clarissa pleaded. Her voice quavered, raw with emotion. Daniel attempted to compose himself. Yes, there were meetings, but they were about her role in the company, about her financial struggles. "We never," he cut off, uncertain how to explain the 1,000 half-truths he'd lived in the last few months. Veronica seized the moment. "Never? Then why does my phone have pictures of us kissing in your car last week?" Another deafening hush. All eyes drilled into Daniel, who appeared to deflate under the weight of his shame. Clarissa's lip trembled. The swirl of confusion, anger, and heartbreak threatened to push her over the edge. Harriet's hand tightened around her daughter's shoulder, feeling the deep maternal urge to shield Clarissa from further pain. Suddenly, Harriet exploded with anger, turning on Veronica. "How dare you come here uninvited and spew these lies on my daughter's special day? You have no shame." Veronica's stance turned smug. "Your precious daughter is living in a fantasy. I'm just here to show her the truth." She took a step closer, eyes flicking with triumph. "Daniel has been in my bed, telling me he's unsure about fatherhood, that Clarissa's pregnancy is making him feel trapped. He needed an escape, and I provided it." The harsh words struck Clarissa like a physical blow. She clutched her stomach, feeling an overwhelming surge of pain, not just emotional, but physical. For a terrifying second, she worried about going into early labor. She inhaled slowly, trying to steady herself. One of Daniel's business associates, an older man named Robert Morris, a fellow millionaire who'd partnered with Daniel in a philanthropic project, cleared his throat. He stepped forward, frowning deeply. Robert was a steadfast ally to the Myers and had known them for years. "Veronica, do you have any sense of decency? This is a baby shower, for heaven's sake. If you truly had an issue, you should have addressed it in private." Veronica shot him a poisonous glare. "Stay out of this, old man. Your moral judgments don't apply when it comes to matters of the heart. Or is it the wallet?" Gasps emanated from the crowd. Robert's eyes blazed, but he contained his anger. He looked at Clarissa sympathetically. "We should put an end to this. Clarissa, Daniel, perhaps you should speak privately." Clarissa struggled to find her voice. "No," she said firmly, tears still glistening. "I want to know the truth, all of it. Right here, right now." Daniel sank into a chair, pressing his palms against his forehead as if trying to scrub away the guilt. He had never intended for it to reach this point. To him, it was just a misguided emotional affair, or so he told himself. Physical, yes, there had been a kiss or two, but he swore to himself it went no further. Now, faced with Veronica's dramatic display, it seemed he had lost control entirely. With everyone watching, their eyes drilling holes into him, Daniel began to speak in a broken voice. "Yes, I spent time with Veronica," he confessed. "I was stupid. I was lonely. Clarissa has been so focused on the baby, and I—" He paused, choking on his words. "No, that's not an excuse. I should never have crossed that line, but I swear to you, Clarissa, on our baby's life, that I never slept with her." It was emotionally inappropriate, but it never went beyond a few moments of weakness. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some believed him, understanding that mistakes happen when couples face major life changes. Others saw it as the typical denial of a cheater who'd been caught. Veronica's lip curled in scorn. "How dare you reduce me to a fling?" she hissed. "We had a connection. You told me you were unhappy, that Clarissa wasn't fulfilling your needs. And now you're throwing me to the wolves in front of all these people?" Daniel rose to his feet, trying to maintain composure. "We didn't have a future. I told you that from the start. I love my wife. I love our child." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry for how I led you on, but this is not the way to handle it." Clarissa watched their exchange, her heart in tatters. The man she revered had betrayed her in ways she never imagined possible. Yet the line between a total affair and an emotional entanglement was blurred, especially given Veronica's allegations. Clarissa's mind spun with questions. Who was telling the truth? Was Daniel partially lying to save face? How could she have been so blind? Harriet steadied Clarissa, whispering that they should leave to end this humiliation. But Clarissa, fueled by a mixture of heartbreak and anger, decided to confront Veronica herself. She stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. "Veronica, I don't know how far things went. I don't know what you hope to gain by humiliating me at my baby shower. But let me make one thing clear: you have no power over my child's future or my marriage." She cast a furious look at Daniel, who appeared remorseful and conflicted. "Whether he is telling the truth about the extent of your relationship or not, you will not destroy me. I won't give you that satisfaction." Veronica's eyes flashed. "You think you can just close the door on reality because you wear a wedding ring. I'm not finished." She took a step closer and announced, "Daniel, the first pregnant too." A stunned hush fell again, even heavier than before. Clarissa's trembling hand flew to her mouth. Harriet's eyes nearly popped out of her head. Robert Morris looked ready to call security, and Daniel's face went bone white. The entire atmosphere, once filled with pastel decorations and the promise of new life, had been seized by an almost suffocating gloom. Clarissa felt her knees buckle. She's pregnant too? The betrayal cut even deeper than any heartbreak she had ever imagined. Harriet had to steady Clarissa again, worried she might collapse. Guests stood frozen, torn between disbelief and morbid curiosity. Daniel swallowed hard, glancing at Veronica in horror. "What are you talking about?" Veronica folded her arms, her gaze smug. "I found out a few weeks ago. I thought you'd be happy. After all, you told me privately that you weren't sure if Clarissa's baby was truly what you wanted. You said you might want a child with someone else someday." She shot Clarissa a twisted look. "I guess that day is now." "You're lying," Daniel shouted. "I never said that. You're just—" "Oh, I'm lying." Veronica took out a folded piece of paper from her clutch. "Doctor's note confirming my pregnancy. Should I show everyone?" She looked around the crowd, whose collective shock had turned into a silent horror show. "Perhaps you'd like me to describe the night of conception. The hotel you booked for us, remember? The one near the beach in Santa Monica?" Clarissa, her face hot with tears, tried to hold on to a shred of composure. Daniel was gasping for breath, struggling to piece together Veronica's claims. The child could easily be someone else's. He and Veronica had only kissed unless, in a moment of drunken weakness, he had blacked out. The confusion ate at him. In an attempt to reason, he shook his head vigorously. "This is madness," he muttered. "Clarissa, the first never, maybe for a fleeting second I was drawn to her, but I did not sleep with her. She's lying to tear us apart." Veronica raised an eyebrow. "So I'm lying about the baby now. Care to do a paternity test?" "I'd be happy to oblige." Clarissa couldn't stand it anymore. Panic surged within her. She cradled her belly, terrified that the stress might harm her unborn child. The feeling of betrayal was crushing. Her husband might have fathered another woman's child. Her entire relationship felt like a house of cards toppling in an earthquake. Harriet sensed the imminent danger of Clarissa's stress levels and guided her to a nearby chair. Robert Morris signaled to some of the hotel staff, requesting water, a cold towel, anything to help Clarissa calm down. In the background, the hum of whispered gossip escalated. Photos and videos were surely being posted online. Then, in the midst of the chaos, an unexpected voice spoke up. One of the servers from Daniel's restaurant, a young woman named Lily, stepped forward nervously. She recognized Veronica well and had overheard staff gossip about her. "I'm sorry," Lily began, voice trembling, "but I have something to say." All eyes pivoted to Lily, who seemed to gather her courage. "I overheard Veronica on her phone a few weeks ago. She was bragging that she'd found the perfect man to pin a pregnancy on. Her words, not mine. She said he was rich, successful, and that once she claimed he was the father, she'd be set for life." A ripple of shock swept through the crowd. Veronica shot Lily a look of pure venom. "Shut your mouth. You don't know anything," but Lily persisted. "She specifically mentioned forging a document if necessary. I was so disturbed, but I didn't think it was my place to say anything. Now I see that I should have spoken up sooner." She turned to Clarissa with a remorseful expression. "I'm so sorry. I should have warned you or Daniel." A glimmer of hope stirred in Clarissa's chest. Could this entire fiasco be part of Veronica's twisted game? Daniel, although furious at Lily for not coming forward earlier, felt an immense wave of relief. "She's lying about the baby," he repeated firmly, stepping toward Clarissa. "The first, swear, Clarissa, the first did not do this." Veronica, cornered by Lily's accusation, found her confidence faltering, but she put on one last show of defiance. "You pitiful little waitress, trying to tear me down. Everyone here knows you're just a petty employee who wants to get in the boss's good graces. I have a doctor's note, and I will prove it's real." Daniel seized the moment. "Fine. Let's do a test. Right now, the best fertility clinic in Beverly Hills is less than 15 minutes away. We can settle this once and for all." Veronica blanched. She hadn't anticipated being backed into a corner so quickly. She stammered, "Fine, let's go. Right now, let's go." But instead of heading for the door, Veronica whipped around to face Clarissa. Her eyes glimmered with twisted glee. "Even if the baby is not Daniel's, think about what you've witnessed. He cheated, emotionally at least. He lied. He betrayed you. You'll never trust him again. Isn't that enough for you to leave him?" Clarissa stared at Veronica, raw heartbreak in her eyes. Indeed, trust was shattered, and no matter the paternity test result, Daniel's betrayal was undeniable. Still, Clarissa felt a flicker of strength inside her. She held herself upright, mustering a resolve she didn't know she had. "You've done enough damage," she told Veronica, her voice trembling but firm. "Now get out of my baby shower. If you have proof of your claims, take them to a lawyer. Otherwise, leave me my child and my family in peace." Veronica realized her plan to publicly humiliate Clarissa had spectacularly backfired. While she had certainly caused a huge rift, the presence of Lily and the immediate call for a paternity test threatened to expose her for the manipulative opportunist she was. Without further theatrics, she dashed toward the exit, pushing past stunned guests. Yet before she could vanish, Daniel's security team, who, upon noticing the escalating drama, had stationed themselves at the ballroom doors, approached her. "Excuse me, ma'am," one security guard said, stepping into her path. "We have been asked to ensure that you do not cause further disturbance. Would you please come with us?" Sensing that a physical confrontation wouldn't benefit her, Veronica plastered on a final sneer and held her head high. "Don't worry. I'm leaving, but this isn't over." With that, she stormed out, letting the heavy doors bang shut behind her. Inside, the crowd exhaled collectively, as if they'd been holding their breath for an eternity. Clarissa, still in shock, sank deeper into her chair. Harriet kneeled beside her, holding her hand. Daniel looked lost, torn between relief and despair. The entire ambience, once bright and joyful, had been poisoned by betrayal and lies. Robert Morris, trying to take charge of the situation, clapped his hands. Everyone, perhaps we should give the family some privacy. The shower is concluded for now. Please respect. Clarissa's need for rest. Guests, nodding solemnly, began to disperse, some whispering consolation and others casting suspicious glances at Daniel. A few staff members from the hotel helped pack up the gifts, while Harriet guided Clarissa toward a private room to calm down. Daniel lingered behind, speaking quietly to Robert. "I need to fix this," he said, voice hushed. "I made a huge mistake. I don't know how to make it right." Robert's expression was grave. "First, go to Clarissa, apologize, assure her you'll do the paternity test to clear your name on that front. The rest, well, you'll need to earn her trust again, if that's even possible." Daniel nodded, feeling like the loneliest man in the world. He might have been a millionaire, but in that moment, he felt emotionally bankrupt. Clarissa's entire body trembled with the aftershocks of what had just transpired. She sat in the hotel's private suite, Harriet holding her hand while a concerned nurse summoned by the hotel staff checked her blood pressure. Once it was clear Clarissa was physically stable, Harriet thanked the nurse and insisted that the best medicine for her daughter right now was peace and quiet. "Mum," Clarissa finally said in a hushed tone, "I can't believe all of this. I'm so humiliated." Harriet squeezed her daughter's hand. "You have nothing to be ashamed of, sweetheart. That woman was vile. Daniel, he's going to have to answer to you, and he'll need to do everything in his power to repair this." Clarissa's eyes brimmed with tears again. "I thought we had the perfect marriage. I never imagined something like this could happen." Harriet stroked her hair gently. "Marriage is complicated. People make mistakes, but only you can decide if this mistake is forgivable. Right now, you need to focus on your health and the baby." A soft knock on the door drew their attention. Daniel stood there, looking like a man on the edge of collapse. His once confident posture was slumped in remorse. Harriet gave Clarissa's shoulder a reassuring squeeze before stepping out of the room, granting them privacy. Clarissa eyed him warily, her heart torn between love and betrayal. He began to speak, voice thick with emotion. "Clarissa, the first am so sorry. I never wanted you to be hurt like this. I was weak. I was foolish. But I swear on everything I hold dear, I never slept with her." Clarissa took a shaky breath. "Daniel, you still kissed her. You confessed personal feelings to her that you should have been sharing with me. You said you felt trapped by the pregnancy." He flinched, as though struck. "That was never how I truly felt. I was overwhelmed. Yes, but I love you. I love our child. Veronica manipulated me." Clarissa laughed bitterly. "Of course she did, but you let her. That doesn't absolve you of blame. How can I trust you now?" Daniel lowered his head. "I don't expect you to trust me right away, but give me a chance to prove myself. I'll do the paternity test immediately. I'll handle Veronica legally if needed. I'll go to counseling. Anything to show you that you and our baby come first." The sincerity in his voice tugged at Clarissa's heart. She wanted to believe him, but the wound was fresh, the pain still excruciating. With tears spilling down her cheeks, she shook her head slowly. "I just need time. This entire day, what was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life, has been ruined. I need space, Daniel." He nodded, eyes shimmering with tears. "I understand." With that, he slowly turned and walked out, leaving Clarissa to her grief. Harriet slipped back in, wrapping her daughter in a comforting embrace. The mother-to-be's tears stained her once lovely dress, and the shadow of betrayal cloaked what should have been a radiant celebration. Veronica was furious. She had fled the baby shower in a storm of embarrassment, but she wasn't ready to concede defeat. For days after the event, rumors spread across social media. Short videos of her confrontation at the shower popped up on gossip blogs. People speculated whether Daniel was indeed the father of her alleged baby, or if she was a cunning gold digger. The majority seemed to side with Clarissa, condemning Veronica's brazen attempt to overshadow the baby shower. In the court of public opinion, Veronica was a pariah, but still, she believed she had a trump card. She knew that whether or not the child was Daniel's, the spectre of paternity could rattle him. If he wanted to ensure she remained silent about their dalliance, whatever shape it took, he might be inclined to settle financially. She dreamt of a lavish lifestyle, and she wasn't about to let that dream slip away. Veronica scheduled an appointment at a reputable OB-GYN in Beverly Hills, forging Daniel's name on forms as the potential father. She planned to use the records as leverage, confident she could claim Daniel was refusing to accept responsibility. She also booked a consultation with a high-powered lawyer known for winning massive paternity suits. Even if DNA tests disproved Daniel's fatherhood, she hoped to drag out the process long enough to gain a sizable settlement. She reveled in the idea of Clarissa losing faith in Daniel, fueling a fire that might burn the marriage to ash. Yet there was one factor Veronica hadn't anticipated: the tight-knit nature of Daniel's business empire. Many employees saw Clarissa as the beloved wife of their boss, a kind soul who often donated to their family causes. Lily's confession at the shower had earned her scorn from Veronica, but Lily was quietly praised by co-workers for doing the right thing. Word spread, and soon the entire staff was banding together, refusing to cooperate with Veronica. In fact, some employees had evidence of Veronica's manipulative tactics: texts, overheard conversations, times she'd tried to seduce or blackmail other managers. The tide was turning, and it wasn't in Veronica's favor. As promised, Daniel wasted no time setting up a DNA paternity test. Though typically performed after the baby's birth, there were prenatal tests that could determine paternity with a blood sample from the mother. Veronica, savoring the drama, agreed to a non-invasive prenatal paternity NIPP test. So long as Daniel footed the bill, she feigned reluctance, acting as though she were being pressured by a powerful man. In reality, she hoped the test results could be delayed, giving her more time to extort hush money. But Daniel was done being a victim of Veronica's schemes. He requested a top-notch lab used by many Hollywood celebrities who needed privacy and speed. The lab staff had zero tolerance for tampering or bribes. Veronica submitted her sample, confident she could coax or blackmail a technician. She quickly learned that the lab's security measures were too strict. By the time she realized how tightly monitored the facility was, she was in too deep. Clarissa, meanwhile, wrestled with heartbreak and anxiety. Despite her anger, she felt a twinge of dread at the thought that the test could confirm Veronica's pregnancy with Daniel. What if he really fathered her child? The betrayal would be insurmountable. She might walk away for good, filing for divorce and raising her baby on her own. On the other hand, if the test cleared Daniel, how would she reconcile the emotional affair? Would she try to forgive him? Could she even salvage the shards of trust left between them? Days passed, filled with tension. Harriet insisted Clarissa stay at her house, away from the marital home she shared with Daniel. Clarissa agreed, but she allowed Daniel to visit each evening to check on her health. Their interactions were polite but strained. Sometimes Clarissa would break down in tears, lamenting that she didn't know if she could ever forgive him. Daniel would patiently listen, offering gentle reassurances that his love was real. Finally, the test results arrived. Daniel opened the envelope in the presence of his lawyer, Robert Morris, and Clarissa. Hands trembling, Clarissa read over his shoulder the result: 0% chance that Daniel was the father. A collective sigh of relief filled the room. Daniel hugged Clarissa, tears of gratitude in his eyes. Clarissa cried too, though not solely from relief. She cried for the betrayal she had endured, for the baby shower fiasco, for the heartbreak that might have been avoided if Daniel had been stronger or more transparent. Robert Morris wasted no time. He reached out to a trusted contact in the district attorney's office, explaining how Veronica had forged documents, blackmailed Daniel, and defamed him. The wheels of justice began to turn, albeit slowly. Soon, Veronica would realize that not only had she failed to break Daniel and Clarissa's marriage, but she might face legal consequences for her deceit. When Veronica received the official paternity test results, her fury knew no bounds. Yet she quickly pivoted to her next strategy. She filed a lawsuit against Daniel for intentional infliction of emotional distress, claiming he had strung her along, causing her mental anguish. She demanded a settlement, hoping Daniel would pay to keep the scandal from further tarnishing his reputation. Daniel's legal team responded with chilling efficiency. They countersued for defamation, blackmail, and fraud. They possessed a trove of evidence collected from staff members' texts, audio recordings, and other documentation. Veronica found herself cornered. No powerful lawyer would take her case without a massive retainer, something she couldn't afford. She was forced to rely on a small-time attorney who took half-hearted interest in her plight. Word spread among other wealthy entrepreneurs in Los Angeles, particularly those who used to see Veronica as a charming, if ambitious, hostess. She was effectively blacklisted from high-end establishments, her manipulations too notorious. She tried applying for hostess jobs elsewhere, but her name raised red flags. A few tabloids wrote scathing exposes on her infiltration attempts into the Maya Empire. She even contemplated leaving Los Angeles altogether. But before she could finalize an escape plan, Veronica received another blow, a subpoena. Daniel's legal team was pushing for a thorough investigation into her alleged forgeries. If proven, Veronica could face criminal charges. The baby shower fiasco, which she had planned as her triumphant reveal, had snowballed into her downfall. Her illusions of grandeur evaporated, leaving her with the stark reality that she had become a social outcast, financially desperate, and possibly on the brink of facing jail time. Clarissa watched from the sidelines as Veronica's life crumbled, yet she took little joy in it. She was too focused on managing her own stress levels and preparing for the arrival of her baby. The memory of her baby shower, once envisioned as a magical day, still loomed over her like a dark cloud. Daniel, for his part, devoted himself to repairing the marriage. He began therapy to address the emotional barriers that led him to confide in Veronica. He also insisted Clarissa join him for couples counseling once a week. Initially, Clarissa resisted. She was angry and felt betrayed, questioning whether therapy could mend something so profoundly damaged. But Harriet gently encouraged her, reminding Clarissa that her child deserved two parents who at least attempted reconciliation. Counseling sessions were raw and painful. Clarissa vented her anger, crying over how Daniel's half-truths had shattered her self-esteem. She admitted feeling insecure about her body during pregnancy, about Daniel possibly losing interest in her. Daniel confessed the fears he had about being a father, worries about not living up to the role, about losing his identity in the process. He admitted that he found Veronica's attention flattering, a reminder of his pre-marriage freedom. But as the weeks passed, the therapy sessions fostered open conversations they had never had before. Slowly, Clarissa saw that Daniel wasn't some cold-hearted monster, but rather a flawed man who made terrible choices. The bond they shared, once so strong, might be rebuilt if they worked hard enough. During this time, Harriet remained a pillar of support. She helped Clarissa with everyday tasks, soothed her daughter's grief, and quietly reminded Daniel that if he ever pulled such a stunt again, she would personally ensure Clarissa never suffered. Despite the tension, Harriet understood the complexities of love and betrayal. Her presence anchored Clarissa in hope. Just as it seemed everything was settling into a pattern of slow healing, a twist emerged from an unexpected source: Veronica's own mother. A frail, older woman arrived at Daniel's office one afternoon, politely asking to speak with him. Concerned, Daniel invited her in, uncertain of her motives. She introduced herself as Marjorie Cole. Her grey, streaked hair and weary eyes spoke of a hard life. She confessed that she hadn't spoken to her daughter, Veronica, in years. But she'd seen the scandal unfold on local news stations and read about it in tabloids. She was horrified to learn her daughter had become so consumed by greed and hatred. Veronica was always troubled, Marjorie whispered. She wanted to escape poverty at all costs. I tried to raise her right, but I failed. I'm sorry for the pain she's caused you and your family. Daniel, still reeling from all the damage Veronica had inflicted, wasn't sure how to respond. I appreciate your apology, Mrs. Cole, but your daughter nearly destroyed my marriage. She humiliated my wife in front of our entire social circle. Tears slipped from Marjorie's eyes. I know. I can't excuse her actions, but I want to help you. I have information that might persuade her to drop all legal claims and vanish from your life forever. My daughter has a history of forging documents and blackmailing men. She was involved in a similar scandal back in Florida, though it never got this big. I have proof that can ensure you win your countersuit. She handed over a worn-out folder containing letters, testimonies, and dated photos. Daniel thumbed through them, astonished. If the evidence was authentic, it would be the final nail in Veronica's coffin. She wouldn't be able to manipulate the legal system anymore. Marjorie sighed, her shoulders sagging. I'm not doing this for her. I'm doing this for the innocent lives she's trying to trample. No one deserves what my daughter has done. Daniel thanked her, promising to handle the matter discreetly. He walked her to the door, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. Veronica's mother had essentially delivered the means to end this battle. The entire situation felt surreal, one mother stepping in to help protect another mother from her own daughter's cruelty. Armed with Marjorie's documents, Daniel's lawyers swiftly dismantled Veronica's final legal claims. Faced with irrefutable evidence of her history of fraud, Veronica's attorney advised her to drop the suit. She had no choice but to comply. The countersuit for defamation and fraud loomed large, and she knew she was on the brink of criminal charges if she continued to fight. Desperate, Veronica reached out to Daniel, leaving tearful voicemails. She begged him to meet her privately, to show mercy. Daniel refused. He saw no point in hearing more of her manipulations. He wanted her out of his life, out of Clarissa's life, and never again to torment them. The last message Veronica left was a bitter diatribe, cursing Daniel and promising that he'd regret discarding her. But her words carried no weight. She had lost all leverage. Daniel's lawyers arranged for Veronica to sign a cease and desist agreement, preventing her from making further public statements about the Myers. In return, Daniel's side agreed to drop certain financial damages. Veronica was left jobless, socially ostracized, and saddled with legal fees that would haunt her for years. She disappeared from the Los Angeles social scene, rumored to have moved to a cheaper state. There, she might find a fresh start, or she might simply repeat her cycle of deception. It no longer mattered to Clarissa or Daniel. They were free of her. With Veronica gone, Clarissa and Daniel's focus turned toward their baby's impending arrival. The stress of the ordeal had taken a toll on Clarissa's final weeks of pregnancy. However, through counseling, she learned strategies to cope with anxiety, reminding herself that her baby needed serenity and positive energy. Daniel worked hard to reassure her, taking over more responsibilities, surprising her with daily acts of kindness, reading parenting books, and practicing baby swaddling techniques to prepare. Harriet remained at their side, providing home-cooked meals and moral support. She watched as Daniel humbly tried to rebuild the trust he had broken. Over time, Harriet's hostility toward him softened, but she maintained a protective stance. She reminded him daily, either through a pointed look or a cautionary word, that Clarissa's well-being was paramount. At last, on a clear, sunny morning, Clarissa went into labor. Daniel rushed her to Cedars Sinai Medical Center. The labor was long and exhausting, but Clarissa endured with Daniel by her side. He held her hand through every painful contraction, whispering words of encouragement and love. Though a piece of Clarissa's heart still ached from the betrayal, she found solace in seeing Daniel's earnest devotion in that crucial moment. Their son, named Nathaniel James Meyer, entered the world with a sharp, healthy cry. Clarissa wept with relief and joy. Daniel cradled the tiny infant, tears streaming down his cheeks. Harriet, who had been pacing in the waiting room, rushed in to behold her grandson. She, too, was overwhelmed by emotion. For a moment, the bitterness of the past months slipped away, replaced by the miracle of new life. In the days following Nathaniel's birth, Clarissa and Daniel navigated the intense learning curve of new parenthood. Late-night feedings, diaper changes, and the simultaneous exhaustion and wonder that came with caring for an infant. The specter of Veronica's betrayal still lingered, but it felt more distant with each day spent bonding as a family. Daniel continued therapy individually, determined not to repeat the emotional missteps of the past. Couples counseling also resumed, with the added dynamic of parenthood shaping their discussions. Clarissa took comfort in small gestures, the way Daniel volunteered for 3 a.m. feedings, how he gazed at Nathaniel with pure adoration, how he insisted Clarissa sleep while he handled chores. These tangible displays of love helped mend the wounds of betrayal. Still, it wasn't a fairy tale ending. Scars remained. Clarissa had triggered certain songs or places that reminded her of the baby shower fiasco. She had nightmares of Veronica barging in with new accusations. Sometimes, in moments of doubt, she questioned whether Daniel truly wanted this life. But then she'd see him carefully rocking Nathaniel to sleep or catch him reading a fatherhood article. She realized that, step by step, he was proving himself. Harriet, too, noticed the changes. She watched Daniel transform from a confident businessman into a gentle, nurturing father. She quietly confided to Clarissa, "He's growing up. Sometimes men take longer than we'd like, but if he's genuinely working to be better, that's worth considering." The final note of karma came months later when Veronica, unable to pay her mounting legal bills, was forced to file for bankruptcy. Word reached Los Angeles through a mutual acquaintance. Clarissa, holding Nathaniel, read the news on her phone. She experienced a strange mix of emotions. She had never wished utter ruination on anyone, but part of her felt a quiet sense of justice. Veronica had inflicted incredible harm, and now she was paying the price. Daniel, reading over Clarissa's shoulder, gently kissed her temple. "I hope she finds peace someday," he said, surprising Clarissa. She expected rage or bitterness, but perhaps therapy had changed him. He knew better than anyone the destructive power of resentment. Letting go was, in its own way, more liberating. Clarissa nodded, tears welling in her eyes. She thought back to her ruined baby shower, to the humiliating scene that had shattered her world. Yet here she was, cradling a healthy baby boy, next to a husband who was fighting to atone for his mistakes. Life had a strange way of weaving tragedy and joy together. While the memory still stung, Clarissa felt stronger than before. She had survived betrayal, heartbreak, and a public scandal. She had found resilience in herself she never knew existed. Harriet, standing at the doorway, smiled as she saw the little family. She stepped forward, pressing a gentle hand on Clarissa's shoulder. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, "of both of you. In that moment, Clarissa realized that though her baby shower was destroyed, a different kind of celebration was blossoming, a celebration of second chances, personal growth, and the kind of love that endures storms. It wasn't a neat, tidy ending. Healing would be ongoing work. But as Nathaniel gurgled happily in her arms, Clarissa felt hope eclipse the darkness. This was her real life, a fragile, beautiful tapestry of mistakes, forgiveness, and new beginnings. Every fall from grace can offer a chance for redemption if people are willing to learn from their mistakes. Clarissa and Daniel's marriage, once shaken to its core, found fresh footing through honest conversations, therapy, and the tender embrace of new parenthood. The mistress, who orchestrated chaos and nearly succeeded in tearing them apart, ultimately met the consequences of her deeds. She faded from high society and faced the heavy toll of her schemes. While no relationship emerges unscathed from betrayal, Clarissa and Daniel discovered that broken trust can sometimes be rebuilt if two people commit to healing and growth together. If you enjoyed this dramatic tale of deceit, redemption, and hard-earned forgiveness, don't forget to like this video, share it with friends who love a good twist, and subscribe to the channel for more riveting stories. Your support keeps these narratives alive and inspires us to keep creating.
Widowed millionaire hires a maid to play wife for a month, but their connection changes everything. The rain fell relentlessly on the city that evening, its steady rhythm muffled by the chatter of well-dressed elites gathered inside the opulent Crystal Lounge. Chandeliers cast a golden glow over velvet armchairs, and the faint clink of glasses punctuated the air as servers wove seamlessly through the crowd, carrying trays of champagne. Ethan Calloway leaned against the marble bar, his tailored navy suit flawless, his Rolex catching the light. His smile was sharp, his demeanor self-assured, bordering on cocky. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, glancing at the lively poker table nearby. It was a scene he'd mastered, a stage where wealth and power were the currency, and Ethan always came out on top. "You're bored," Lucas Wright's voice broke through the din. He appeared beside Ethan, his grin mischievous, his olive-green eyes sparkling with something darker than mere amusement. Lucas was the kind of man who thrived on stirring chaos, and tonight Ethan was his target. Ethan took a slow sip of his whiskey, arching an eyebrow. "Am I that predictable?" "To me, always," Lucas replied with a chuckle. "Face it, Ethan, you've conquered every game in this room. You need something new, a challenge." Ethan smirked. "You have something in mind, don't you?" Lucas leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I saw her again today." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Her?" Lucas gestured toward the large bay windows that overlooked the rain-slicked streets. A figure was barely visible under the neon glow of a nearby cafe sign. Her hunched frame sat motionless on a tattered blanket, clutching a worn cup that held a few damp dollar bills. "Abby." Ethan let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "The beggar? What's your fascination with her?" Lucas's smile turned sly. "She's not just a beggar. She's a test of how far your charm can go. Think about it, Ethan. A man of your stature convincing someone like her to marry you. It's the ultimate game." Ethan's amusement faded, replaced by an edge of disbelief. "Marry her? Are you out of your mind? Afraid you can't?" Lucas's tone was taunting now, his words deliberately cutting. "I mean, you're Ethan Calloway, right? The man whose clothes deals worth billions. Surely you can handle one homeless woman. Or maybe you've lost your touch." Ethan bristled. Lucas knew exactly how to provoke him. "You're ridiculous." "Am I?" Lucas pressed, his grin widening. "Or are you just scared you'll lose for once?" The room seemed to quiet for a moment, as if the world had paused to watch Ethan's reaction. He set his glass down, his jaw tightening. "Fine. Name your stakes." Lucas's expression turned triumphant. 1 million to be paid on the wedding night. But you can't just charm her. You have to make her fall for you, say yes, and walk down the aisle. No loopholes. Ethan stared at Lucas, weighing the absurdity of the wager. $1 million was pocket change to him, but his pride was priceless. He glanced back out the window where Abby's small frame remained unmoving against the storm. Something about the challenge stirred an unexpected thrill, a break from the monotony of his polished life. "You're on," Ethan said, his voice cold and resolute. He picked up his glass and raised it toward Lucas in mock salute. "To the easiest million I'll ever make." Lucas clinked his glass against Ethan's, his grin unwavering. "To the best game you'll ever play." As the night wore on, Ethan's confidence grew, yet a small unacknowledged unease settled in his chest. This wasn't just a game, it was the beginning of something far more complicated. But Ethan Calloway wasn't a man who backed down. Outside, Abby shifted on her blanket, oblivious to the bet that would soon upend her world. The following morning, the rain had cleared, leaving the city washed in muted sunlight. Ethan Calloway stood at his apartment window, sipping his morning espresso as he overlooked the bustling streets below. His penthouse was a masterpiece of modern design, floor-to-ceiling windows, sleek furniture, and curated art pieces. Yet for all its grandeur, it felt strangely empty, a silent monument to his success. His gaze drifted to his phone, where Lucas's taunting grin from last night still echoed in his mind. The challenge had been absurd, but now, in the clear light of day, it had transformed into something Ethan couldn't ignore. He thrived on being the best, and this was just another game to win. By noon, Ethan was at the cafe where Lucas had spotted Abby. The corner was bustling with tourists and locals alike, the air filled with the hum of conversation and the hiss of espresso machines. Yet amidst the movement, she sat motionless, her presence almost ghost-like against the vibrancy of the city. Abby Harper was hunched over her tattered blanket, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup someone had left her. Her brown coat, patched and frayed, clung to her small frame, and her hair fell in unkempt tangles over her shoulders. She didn't beg outright. She simply sat there, a quiet figure in a world that rarely stopped to notice her. Ethan paused across the street, watching her. There was something disarming about her stillness, the way she seemed both a part of the world and completely separate from it. He adjusted the cuffs of his designer coat and crossed the street, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. "Excuse me," he said, his voice smooth, practiced. Abby looked up, startled, her pale blue eyes meeting his for the first time. They were clear and sharp, a contrast to her disheveled appearance. "Yes," she replied cautiously, her voice soft but steady. Ethan crouched slightly to meet her gaze, his expression friendly, non-threatening. "I couldn't help but notice you've been sitting here for a while. Are you okay? Do you need anything?" Abby's eyes narrowed slightly, as if trying to decipher his intentions. She was used to being ignored, or worse, pitied. This was new, attention wrapped in polished charm. "I'm fine," she said curtly, lowering her gaze back to her cup. Ethan smiled, undeterred. "I was just about to grab a coffee. Can I get you something? A croissant, maybe? They do a great almond one here." Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment she didn't answer. "Why?" she asked finally, her tone edged with suspicion. He feigned surprise. "Why not? It's a small gesture. The world could use more kindness, don't you think?" Abby studied him, her blue eyes scanning his expensive coat, the effortless confidence in his stance, the way his words seemed too polished, too rehearsed. She shrugged finally, her voice tinged with reluctant acceptance. "Coffee, black." Ethan's smile widened, and he stood, brushing invisible dust off his coat. "Black coffee it is. Be right back." As he stepped into the cafe, Abby exhaled slowly, her grip tightening around her cup. She wasn't used to kindness, especially from someone like him. Men in suits didn't talk to her unless they were muttering something about loitering or the city's reputation. Her instincts told her to be wary, but there was something about his persistence that felt different. Inside, Ethan ordered 2 coffees and a croissant, his mind racing. The interaction had been a careful dance, but her guarded demeanor had made it clear this wouldn't be as easy as he'd imagined. She wasn't desperate, and she wasn't naive. Convincing her to trust him would take more than a few charming words. When he returned, he handed her the coffee and placed the croissant beside her without a word. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, gesturing to the edge of the sidewalk. Abby hesitated before nodding. "Suit yourself." Ethan settled beside her, careful to keep a respectful distance. The pavement was cold and slightly damp, but he ignored it. "I'm Ethan, by the way." "Abby," she replied reluctantly, taking a tentative sip of the coffee. It was hot and bitter, and for a fleeting moment she allowed herself to enjoy it. "So, Abby," Ethan began, his tone casual, "what's your story? How'd you end up here?" Her expression hardened instantly. "That's none of your business." He raised his hands in mock surrender. "Fair enough. I didn't mean to pry, just thought sometimes it helps to talk." She studied him for a moment, her gaze skeptical. "What about you?" she asked, her tone sharp. "What's a guy like you doing sitting on the sidewalk talking to someone like me?" Ethan chuckled, the sound warm and disarming. "Fair question. I guess you could say I'm tired of the same old routine. Thought I'd try something different." "Different," Abby repeated, her tone flat, unconvinced. "Exactly," he said, leaning back slightly. "You know, they say the most interesting people are the ones everyone else overlooks. I think that might be true." She gave him a look that was equal parts disbelief and irritation. "You don't know me." "Not yet," Ethan admitted, his smile softening. "But I'd like to." Abby shook her head, her laugh dry and humorless. "You're either crazy or I don't know what you are." Ethan laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to catch her off guard. "Maybe a little crazy," he admitted, "but I'd like to think it's the good kind." For a moment the world seemed to fade, the noise of the street, the curious glances from passers-by. It was just the two of them, 2 strangers sharing a tentative connection. Abby looked away first, her expression guarded once more. "You're persistent, I'll give you that," she muttered. Ethan grinned. "I've been told it's one of my better qualities." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Ethan stood, brushing off his coat. "I should let you get back to whatever it is you do." Abby glanced up at him, her gaze unreadable. "Thanks for the coffee." "Any time," he replied, slipping a card from his pocket and placing it beside her, "in case you ever need anything." She picked up the card, her fingers brushing over the embossed name. Ethan Callaway, CEO, Callaway Innovations. Beneath it, a phone number. Abby looked up, but Ethan was already walking away, his confident stride disappearing into the crowd. She stared at the card for a long moment, the name feeling foreign and out of place in her world. What kind of man gives his number to a stranger on the street, she thought, tucking the card into her coat pocket. Whatever his game was, Abby decided she wasn't going to play. Not yet. The days that followed felt like a slow unraveling for Abby. Ethan's polished card weighed heavy in her coat pocket, its smooth edges a constant reminder of their odd encounter. She hadn't planned to keep it, yet every time she considered tossing it into the nearest trash can, something stopped her. The city pulsed around her as always, a cacophony of footsteps, honking taxis, and hurried voices. But in her small corner near the cafe, Abby sat still, observing the world as she always did. The passers-by rarely acknowledged her, their gazes skimming past as if she were part of the concrete. It was safer that way, being invisible, or so she'd thought. It was late afternoon when Ethan returned. She noticed him before he spoke, his presence commanding despite his casual attire. This time he wore a leather jacket over a simple grey sweater, his usual air of superiority tempered by a more relaxed demeanour. He approached slowly, his hands tucked into his pockets, as if he were a friend stopping by instead of a stranger with unknown motives. "Back again?" Abby asked, her tone skeptical, as she looked up from the paperback she'd found discarded in a nearby trash bin. Ethan smiled, unbothered by her lack of enthusiasm. "You make it sound like I'm stalking you. Are you?" "Not intentionally," he replied, lowering himself onto the sidewalk beside her without waiting for permission. "But I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd see if you needed another coffee." Abby shut the book and set it aside, crossing her arms. "I don't need your charity." "It's not charity," Ethan countered, leaning back on his hands. "It's coffee. There's a difference." She sighed, her expression weary. "What do you want, Ethan? Really?" The question hung between them, heavier than the hum of traffic or the distant chatter of cafe patrons. Ethan hesitated, his usual confidence faltering under the weight of her gaze. For the first time, the practiced charm he wore so easily felt out of place, almost inappropriate. "I don't know," he admitted finally, surprising even himself. "Maybe, to get to know you." Abby snorted, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Why would someone like you want to know someone like me?" The simplicity of her question cut through Ethan's defenses, leaving him momentarily unarmed. Why indeed? He could have blamed the bet, the lure of proving Lucas wrong, but there was more to it now. Something about Abby intrigued him, something he couldn't quite define. "Why not?" he asked, avoiding the deeper truth. Abby studied him, her blue eyes piercing as if she could see the cracks beneath his polished exterior. "People don't just show up and decide to care, especially not people like you." Ethan's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being doubted, and her skepticism struck a nerve. "Maybe I'm not like other people." "Maybe," she replied, her voice soft but unconvinced. "Or maybe you're just bored." Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You're not wrong. I've been bored, trapped in this cycle of work, parties, meaningless conversations, but meeting you, this doesn't feel meaningless." Abby flinched as though his words were a weapon she hadn't expected. She looked away, her fingers picking at the frayed edges of her coat. "You don't know anything about me." "Then tell me." Ethan pressed gently. "I want to know." For a long moment, Abby said nothing. The city moved around them, oblivious to the small, fragile connection being forged on the damp sidewalk. Finally, she spoke, her voice distant, as if she were recounting a story that didn't belong to her. "I used to be a teacher," she began, her words halting. "Elementary school. I loved it. The kids, the way their faces lit up when they learned something new. It was enough, until it wasn't." Ethan listened, his attention unwavering. This was a side of Abby he hadn't expected, a glimpse of the person she'd been before life had worn her down. "What happened?" he asked softly. Abby shrugged, her shoulders heavy with unspoken pain. "Life happened. My mom got sick. Cancer. I took time off to care for her, but the medical bills kept piling up. When she passed, I had nothing left. No job, no savings, just this." She gestured vaguely to her surroundings, her voice tinged with bitterness. "Now I sit here, invisible to the world, hoping for enough change to buy a meal." Ethan felt a pang of guilt, his chest tightening. Her story wasn't unique. Countless people had fallen through the cracks of a system that didn't care, but hearing it from her made it personal, tangible. "You're not invisible to me," he said quietly. Abby looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Maybe you should have left me that way." Her words stung, but Ethan didn't flinch. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I'm organizing a charity event tomorrow night," he said, handing it to her. "It's at the Metropolitan Grand. Black tie, champagne, the works. I want you to come." Abby stared at the invitation, her lips curving into a bitter smile. "You want me to crash your fancy party? Do you even hear yourself?" "You wouldn't be crashing," Ethan replied. "You'd be my guest." She laughed, the sound sharp and incredulous. "I don't own anything remotely black tie or even clean." "I'll take care of it," he said, his tone firm. "All you have to do is show up." Abby shook her head, her fingers clutching the invitation. "Why are you doing this?" Ethan met her gaze, his expression earnest. "Because I see something in you, Abby, something real, and I think you deserve a chance to see it too." Her grip on the invitation tightened, her mind racing. Part of her wanted to tear it up, to reject his offer and the tangled motives behind it. But another part, a quieter, braver part, was curious. "Fine," she said finally, her voice low, "but if this is some kind of joke—" "It's not," Ethan interrupted, standing and brushing off his jeans. "I'll send a car for you at 7. Without waiting for her response, he turned and walked away, leaving Abby with the weight of his words and the invitation in her hands. She watched him disappear into the crowd, her heart pounding with a mix of fear, anger, and something she hadn't felt in years, hope. The day passed in a haze of uncertainty for Abby. The invitation to the charity event lay on the edge of her makeshift bedding, the elegant script mocking her. The Metropolitan Grand, it might as well have been a world away. The idea of stepping into that life, even for one night, felt absurd. By late afternoon, as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the street, a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb where she sat. The driver, a tall man with a crisp suit and a polite but expressionless face, stepped out and approached her. "Miss Harper?" he asked, his voice calm and professional. Abby blinked up at him, startled. "Yeah?" "Mr. Calloway sent me to assist you in preparation for the evening," the man continued. "If you'd follow me, please." She hesitated, clutching her coat tightly around her. "I don't think—" "Mr. Calloway insisted," the driver interjected gently, his expression unwavering. "He arranged for everything." Abby glanced down at herself, her patched coat, the worn boots that barely kept out the cold, the faint smell of the streets that clung to her clothes. A deep sense of inadequacy swelled within her, but something else stirred too, curiosity. Against her better judgment, she stood, brushing off invisible dust. "Fine," she muttered. "But if this is some kind of joke, I'm out." The driver nodded, opening the car door with a fluid motion. Abby slid inside hesitantly, sinking into the soft leather seats. The interior smelled of fresh citrus and cedar, a stark contrast to the street she knew. She gripped the edges of the seat as the car merged into traffic, her mind racing. The car stopped outside a boutique in an upscale part of town. The shop's name, Amara Atelier, was etched in gold lettering on the window, and inside, elegant mannequins wore gowns that looked like they belonged in a fairy tale. Abby hesitated on the sidewalk, her stomach twisting. She didn't belong here. Before she could turn back, the boutique door swung open, and a woman in a tailored black dress stepped out. "You must be Miss Harper," the woman said warmly, her sharp features softened by a genuine smile. "I'm Gabrielle, and I'll be assisting you today." Abby started, but Gabrielle gestured her inside before she could protest. The boutique smelled of lavender and polished wood, and racks of shimmering dresses lined the walls. Abby stood awkwardly near the entrance, unsure what to do with her hands. "We've been given clear instructions," Gabrielle said, clapping her hands. "Let's get started." Before Abby could respond, she was ushered into a dressing area. Fabric swatches, sparkling jewelry, and rows of high-heeled shoes surrounded her. Gabrielle worked with brisk efficiency, pulling dresses off the racks and holding them against Abby's frame. "What kind of instructions?" Abby asked warily as Gabrielle slipped a measuring tape around her waist. Gabrielle smiled, but didn't answer directly. "Mr. Calloway wants you to feel extraordinary tonight." Abby's chest tightened. The idea of Ethan orchestrating all this was both infuriating and unsettling. She didn't want to owe him anything, yet here she was, letting herself be transformed. Hours later, Abby stood in front of a mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. The gown Gabrielle had chosen was a deep emerald green, the fabric flowing like liquid silk. It hugged her figure in all the right places, accentuating curves she'd long forgotten she had. Her hair, usually a tangled mess, had been swept into a loose chignon, with soft strands framing her face. Gabrielle stepped back, her expression triumphant. "You look stunning." Abby swallowed hard, her throat dry. "I look different." "You look like you," Gabrielle corrected gently. "The version of you the world should see." Abby turned back to the mirror, her fingers brushing the smooth fabric of the gown. For a moment she allowed herself to feel beautiful, even if it was fleeting. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Gabrielle smiled. "Now the car is waiting. You're going to be unforgettable tonight." The ride to the Metropolitan Grand was surreal. Abby sat in the back of the sedan, her fingers fidgeting with the delicate bracelet Gabrielle had fastened around her wrist. The city lights blurred past the window, and her reflection stared back at her, a stranger in borrowed finery. As the car pulled up to the grand entrance, Abby's nerves spiked. The building loomed before her, its marble facade glowing under the evening lights. Elegantly dressed guests milled about, their laughter and conversation floating through the air. The driver opened her door, and Abby stepped out, her heels clicking against the polished stone. The cool night air brushed her bare shoulders, sending a shiver down her spine. She hesitated at the base of the stairs, feeling the weight of 100 invisible eyes. Then she saw him. Ethan stood at the top of the stairs, his black tuxedo tailored to perfection. His gaze locked onto hers, and for a brief moment the usual confidence in his expression faltered. He descended the steps slowly, his hand outstretched. "You came," he said softly, his voice carrying a note of surprise. Abby's heart pounded as she placed her hand in his. "I told you I would." Ethan's lips curved into a smile, but there was something different about it, something genuine, unguarded. For the first time, Abby felt like she wasn't just part of a game, and that terrified her. As they ascended the stairs together, Ethan leaned closer, his voice low. "You're breathtaking." Abby didn't respond. Instead, she tightened her grip on his hand, bracing herself for whatever came next. For better or worse, she was stepping into his world tonight, and there was no turning back. The Metropolitan Grand was a palace of light and sound. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, their refracted brilliance cascading over the elegantly dressed crowd. A string quartet played softly in one corner, their music weaving through the hum of conversations and laughter. Servers moved gracefully between clusters of guests, their trays laden with champagne flutes and delicate hors d'oeuvres. Abby Harper had never felt more out of place. The gown that had seemed so exquisite in the boutique now felt like a costume. Each click of her heels against the marble floor echoed in her ears, amplifying her self-consciousness. She clung to Ethan's arm, not out of affection but necessity, using him as a shield against the curious eyes that darted her way. "This is a lot," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the symphony of opulence. Ethan glanced down at her, his expression unreadable. "You're doing fine. Just breathe." Breathe. It sounded simple enough, but every inhale felt shallow, forced. Abby's fingers tightened around Ethan's arm as he led her deeper into the crowd. The faces that turned to greet them were polished and practiced, their smiles masking subtle whispers and speculative glances. "Ethan, there you are!" A striking woman in a scarlet gown approached, her hair swept into an elegant updo. Her eyes flicked briefly to Abby, before settling on Ethan, her smile widening. "Rebecca," Ethan greeted smoothly, his tone polite but distant. "It's been a while." "It has," Rebecca replied, her gaze darting back to Abby with thinly veiled curiosity. "And who's this?" "Abby Harper," Ethan said, his voice steady. "A guest of mine." Abby forced a smile, but the weight of Rebecca's scrutiny made her skin prickle. The woman's expression remained pleasant, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of disdain. "How lovely," Rebecca said finally, her tone dripping with insincerity. "I didn't realize Ethan had started inviting new faces to these events." Abby's cheeks flushed, and she opened her mouth to respond, but Ethan's hand on hers silenced her. He smiled coolly at Rebecca. "I find that new faces often bring fresh perspectives. Don't you agree?" Rebecca's smile tightened. "Of course. Well, enjoy the evening." As she drifted away, Abby exhaled slowly, her grip on Ethan's arm loosening. "What was that about?" "Don't let her get to you," Ethan said, guiding her toward the bar. "Rebecca's not important." "Seemed like she thought I wasn't important either," Abby muttered, her voice tinged with bitterness. Ethan stopped, turning to face her. "She doesn't know you, and frankly, she doesn't matter. You do." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard, and for a moment she allowed herself to believe him. But the nagging doubt remained, a whisper in the back of her mind reminding her that she didn't belong here. As the evening wore on, Ethan introduced Abby to more people, business associates, old friends, socialites. Each interaction felt like a performance, and Abby struggled to keep up with the polished conversations and subtle power plays. Ethan remained by her side, his charm effortless, his confidence unwavering. But then came Lucas. "Ethan." "Finally!" Lucas's voice boomed as he approached, his grin as wide and smug as ever. He clapped Ethan on the back before turning his attention to Abby. "And this must be the infamous guest I've been hearing about." "Abby Harper," Ethan said, his tone sharper than before. Lucas's grin widened as he extended a hand. "Lucas Wright, a pleasure to meet you." Abby hesitated before shaking his hand. His grip was firm, his eyes calculating. There was something unsettling about the way he looked at her, as if she were a puzzle he was eager to solve. "Ethan's been full of surprises lately," Lucas continued, his tone teasing. "You're quite the unexpected addition." Abby frowned, unsure whether to respond. Lucas's words felt like a barb wrapped in silk, and the way he glanced at Ethan suggested he was enjoying some private joke. "Lucas," Ethan interjected, his voice cold, "I think there's someone over there who needs your attention." Lucas chuckled, holding up his hands in mock surrender. All right. I'll leave you two to it, for now." As Lucas sauntered away, Abby turned to Ethan, her brow furrowed. "What's his deal?" Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Lucas likes to stir the pot. Don't let him get under your skin." But Lucas had already planted a seed of unease in Abby's mind. The way he'd looked at her, the way he'd spoken, it felt like he knew something she didn't. Later in the evening, Ethan led Abby to a quieter corner of the ballroom, away from the noise and the stares. They stood near a grand window, the city lights stretching out before them. "Are you okay?" he asked, his tone softer now. Abby nodded, though the tension in her shoulders betrayed her. "It's overwhelming, that's all." "You're handling it better than most people would," Ethan said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Better than I did my first time." Abby glanced at him, surprised. "You? Nervous?" Ethan chuckled, the sound low and genuine. "Believe it or not, I wasn't always this polished. My first event like this, I spilled red wine on a CEO's white tuxedo. Thought my career was over before it even started." The image of a younger, clumsier Ethan was almost enough to make Abby smile. "What happened?" "I apologized. Profusely. And then I offered to pay for his dry cleaning, which he found hilarious. Turned out he liked me more for being human." Ethan shrugged. "People forget that sometimes." Abby studied him, her expression softening. For the first time she saw a crack in his carefully crafted persona, a glimpse of the man beneath the mask. It was disarming, and she didn't know whether to trust it. "Why did you invite me tonight?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. When he looked back up, there was something vulnerable in his eyes. "Because you deserve to be seen. Not as someone on the street, but as the person you really are." Abby's breath caught in her throat. The sincerity in his words was almost too much to bear. She looked away, blinking back the sting of tears she didn't want to shed. "Maybe," she said finally, her voice trembling, "but I'm not sure I want to be seen by this crowd." Ethan reached out, his fingers brushing hers. "Then let them see you through my eyes." The intimacy of the moment was almost suffocating, and Abby pulled her hand away, retreating into herself. "You don't know me, Ethan. Not really." "Then let me," he said, his voice steady but quiet. Abby met his gaze, searching for the catch, the hidden motive. But all she saw was a man who, for reasons she couldn't understand, seemed determined to pull her out of the shadows. And for the first time she wondered if she might let him. The ride back to her corner of the city was quieter than Abby had expected. The sparkling lights of the Metropolitan Grand faded into the distance as the black sedan wove through the streets. Abby stared out the window, her reflection blurred against the passing scenery. She didn't recognize the woman in the glass, the elegant gown, the pinned-up hair, the faint shimmer of makeup. It felt like she had borrowed someone else's life for the evening, and now she was returning to her own, piece by piece. "Miss Harper," the driver's voice broke the silence. "We're nearly there." Abby nodded absently, her fingers twisting the delicate bracelet still encircling her wrist. She hadn't had the heart to remove it, though it felt out of place now, like a relic from a dream she wasn't sure she wanted to remember. When the car stopped at the curb near her usual spot, Abby hesitated before stepping out. The cold air greeted her like an old companion, and the hum of the city at this hour was a far cry from the symphony of the Grand. She glanced back at the driver, who offered her a polite nod before pulling away. The sound of her boots against the pavement was steady but hollow. Her corner was empty, save for the tattered blanket she'd left behind. She sat down carefully, the gown pooling around her in a way that felt almost mocking. The night had been surreal, but now, in the harsh reality of her world, it felt absurd. Who was she kidding? Ethan's world wasn't hers. It never could be. Ethan Calloway paced the length of his penthouse, a glass of scotch in his hand. The night had gone as he'd planned, almost too perfectly. Abby had been breathtaking, and the room had noticed. Yet, as he replayed the evening in his mind, he couldn't shake the image of her face when she'd asked him why he'd invited her. "You don't know me, Ethan. Not really." The words echoed in his head, cutting deeper than he cared to admit. She was right, of course. He didn't know her, not the way he wanted to, but there was something about her, something that had drawn him in from the moment he'd first seen her on that sidewalk. It wasn't just the bet anymore. He set the glass down and leaned against the window, staring out at the city below. Somewhere out there, Abby was likely cursing his name, regretting the entire night. And yet he couldn't stop himself from wanting to see her again. Abby was still sitting on her blanket when she heard footsteps approaching. She tensed instinctively, her eyes darting toward the figure emerging from the shadows. It was an older man, his clothes worn but clean, his face lined with age and hardship. "You all right there?" he asked, his voice gruff but not unkind. Abby hesitated before nodding. "Yeah, I'm fine." The man frowned, his gaze drifting to the gown she was wearing. "Doesn't seem like it. You look like you just stepped out of one of those fancy parties downtown." Abby let out a bitter laugh. "Something like that." The man studied her for a moment before reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small wrapped sandwich. "Here, looks like you could use this more than me." Abby stared at the offering, her throat tightening. She wasn't hungry, not really, but the gesture caught her off guard. "Thank you," she said softly, taking the sandwich. The man nodded and shuffled off, disappearing into the night. Abby unwrapped the sandwich slowly, her hands trembling. The bread was stale, the filling sparse, but it felt heavier than any meal she'd had in months. The next morning, Abby was startled awake by the sound of approaching footsteps. She blinked against the harsh sunlight, her vision blurring as she tried to make sense of the figure standing in front of her. "Morning, Abby," Lucas Wright said, his smile as sharp as the tailored suit he wore. He held a steaming cup of coffee in one hand, extending it toward her like a peace offering. Abby sat up, her heart pounding. "What are you doing here?" "Relax," Lucas said, his tone light but insincere. "I just wanted to talk." She eyed the coffee warily, but didn't take it. "About what?" Lucas crouched slightly, bringing himself closer to her eye level. "Ethan, and you." Abby's stomach tightened. "What about us?" Lucas's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Look, I don't know what he's told you, but Ethan has a habit of getting caught up in things that don't matter. You shouldn't take it personally." "What are you trying to say?" Abby asked, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her chest. "I'm saying," Lucas replied, his tone softening, "that whatever this is between you two, it's temporary, a distraction. Ethan doesn't live in your world, Abby. And you don't belong in his." Abby's hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms. "If that's true, why are you here? Why not let him figure it out for himself?" Lucas's expression flickered, his confidence faltering for the briefest moment. Then he straightened, his smile returning. "Consider this a courtesy. I'm just trying to save you some heartache." Abby stared at him, her anger simmering beneath the surface. "You don't know anything about me, or Ethan." Lucas stood, brushing off his suit. "Maybe not, but I know how these stories end. Be careful, Abby." As he walked away, Abby felt a surge of defiance rise within her. Lucas's words had cut deep, but they also fueled a determination she hadn't felt in years. If Ethan wanted to play a game, she decided, she'd make sure it was one he'd never forget. The days passed slowly after Lucas's visit, but his words lingered in Abby's mind like a stubborn shadow. "Ethan doesn't live in your world, Abby, and you don't belong in his." She hated how those words gnawed at her, feeding the insecurities she had tried to bury. But she also hated that they fueled something else, a resolve to prove him wrong. Ethan hadn't reached out since the charity gala, and Abby told herself she didn't care. The silence was better than the question she couldn't answer. Yet every time she caught a glimpse of his card tucked into her coat pocket, her chest tightened. Late one afternoon, as the sun dipped low and cast a golden haze over the streets, Abby sat on her usual corner, flipping through the battered paperback she had started reading days ago. The plot was predictable, but it gave her something to focus on other than the constant churn of her thoughts. "Reading anything good?" The voice was smooth, familiar, and entirely unwelcome. Abby looked up to see Ethan standing before her, his hands casually tucked into the pockets of his dark overcoat. His presence was so unexpected, so out of place, that for a moment she wondered if she had imagined him. "It's something to pass the time," she said flatly, closing the book. Ethan tilted his head, his expression softening. "Mind if I sit?" Abby hesitated, torn between the urge to tell him to leave and the curiosity that kept her rooted in place. Finally, she gestured to the spot beside her. "Suit yourself." Ethan lowered himself to the pavement without hesitation, his tailored coat brushing against the concrete. For a moment, they sat in silence, the city's noise a distant hum around them. "You didn't have to come back," Abby said, her voice guarded. "I wanted to," Ethan replied simply. "Why?" Ethan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Because I can't stop thinking about you." The admission hung in the air, heavy and raw. Abby turned to him, her brow furrowing. "What does that even mean?" "It means," Ethan began, his tone quieter now, "that I've been living in this bubble, this perfect, polished life that's always felt a little hollow. And then I met you, and suddenly everything felt real." Abby stared at him, her heart pounding. She wanted to believe him, but the doubt planted by Lucas and by her own experiences kept her walls firmly in place. "That sounds nice," she said, her voice tinged with sarcasm. "But what happens when the novelty wears off? When I'm no longer the shiny real thing that makes you feel better about your life?" Ethan flinched, her words hitting their mark. "It's not like that, Abby." "Then what is it like?" she pressed, her voice rising, because from where I'm sitting, it feels a lot like a game, like you're trying to fix something in yourself by dragging me into your world. Ethan's jaw tightened, his frustration evident. This isn't a game to me. Then prove it, Abby said, her voice trembling. Show me something real, Ethan. Not the tuxedos, not the charity galas, not the perfectly rehearsed charm, just you. Ethan stared at her, the weight of her challenge sinking in. For the first time, he felt the cracks in his carefully constructed facade widen, exposing a vulnerability he wasn't sure he was ready to face. The tension between them was palpable as Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. He handed it to Abby without a word. "What's this?" she asked, her voice wary. "An invitation," Ethan said, "to my world, the real one." Abby unfolded the paper, her eyes scanning the address and time written in his clean, precise handwriting. It wasn't for another gala or event. It was a small cafe in a quieter part of the city, far from the glittering skyscrapers Ethan usually inhabited. "Why?" she asked, her voice softening. "Because I want you to see me, Abby," Ethan said, his gaze steady. "And I want to see you. No pretense, no expectations, just us." Abby stared at the paper, her fingers brushing over the ink. Part of her wanted to throw it back at him, to tell him it was too late, that she didn't care. But another part, the part she had buried beneath years of bitterness and self-preservation, wanted to believe him. "I'll think about it," she said finally, tucking the paper into her pocket. Ethan nodded, a flicker of relief crossing his face. "That's all I'm asking." He stood, brushing off his coat, and offered her a small, tentative smile. "I'll be there at 6 tomorrow. No pressure." Abby didn't respond as he walked away, his figure disappearing into the crowd. She pulled the paper from her pocket and stared at it again, the words blurring as her mind raced. That night, Abby sat on her blanket, staring up at the stars, barely visible through the city's haze. The invitation felt like a lifeline and a trap all at once, tugging her in two directions. Trusting Ethan felt dangerous, but rejecting him felt equally so. Her thoughts drifted to Lucas, to his smug smile and cryptic warnings. He had tried to plant a seed of doubt in her, and she hated that it had worked. But maybe Ethan wasn't like Lucas. Maybe he was different. Or maybe she was setting herself up for heartbreak. Abby pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, her eyes drifting closed as the city buzzed around her. Tomorrow would come soon enough, and with it, a choice she wasn't sure she was ready to make. The following day was unusually warm for the season. Abby had spent the morning debating whether to go to the cafe. She paced the sidewalk near her corner, Ethan's handwritten invitation crumpled in her pocket. Every time she resolved to stay put, a quiet voice inside her urged her forward. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there was something genuine behind Ethan's polished exterior. By the time she arrived at the address, the sun had dipped low in the sky, painting the streets in shades of amber. The cafe was small and unassuming, its wooden sign swaying gently in the breeze. Abby lingered outside, her heart pounding. This wasn't her world. What if Lucas had been right? She shook the thought away and stepped inside. Ethan was already there, seated at a corner table with a cup of coffee in front of him. He wasn't in a suit or one of his carefully curated outfits. Instead, he wore a plain white shirt and dark jeans, his hair slightly mussed, as if he hadn't bothered with his usual precision. When he saw her, his face lit up with a smile that was softer, less rehearsed. He stood, gesturing to the chair across from him. "You came." "I wasn't sure I would," Abby admitted, sliding into the seat. "I wasn't sure you would either," Ethan said, sitting down again. "But I'm glad." A server approached, and Ethan nodded toward Abby. "What would you like?" "Just water," she said quickly, her hands fidgeting in her lap. Ethan raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. The server disappeared, leaving them in the quiet hum of the cafe. Abby glanced around, noting the simplicity of the space. It was nothing like the glittering venues Ethan usually frequented. "You picked an interesting spot," she said, her tone neutral. "I thought it might be easier," Ethan replied, his voice low. "Away from the noise?" "From everything." Abby studied him, her skepticism softening slightly. "So, this is the real Ethan Calloway?" Ethan chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "Something like that. I'm still figuring him out, to be honest." Abby tilted her head. "What does that mean?" "It means," Ethan began, his gaze dropping to his coffee, "that for a long time I've been living a version of myself that everyone else expects. The successful entrepreneur, the life of the party. But lately, I've realized that version doesn't feel like me anymore." Abby's chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, but her walls were still firmly in place. "And what does the real Ethan want?" He looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "To stop pretending, to actually connect with someone, with you." The sincerity in his voice caught Abby off guard. She leaned back, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. "Why me? Of all the people in your world, why are you here with me?" Ethan hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Because you don't care about the things everyone else does. You see through the facade, and you're not afraid to call me out on it. You make me want to be better." Abby laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "You barely know me, Ethan." "Then let me," he said, his voice steady. "Let me prove that this isn't just some fleeting thing." Abby stared at him, her defenses wavering. For so long she had kept the world at arm's length, protecting herself from the pain of rejection. But here was a man willing to step into her world, flaws and all. It terrified her. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I've spent so long keeping people out. Letting you in feels dangerous." Ethan leaned forward, his expression earnest. "It is dangerous. But sometimes the things that scare us the most are the ones worth fighting for." Abby's breath hitched, her chest tightening with a mix of fear and hope. She wanted to believe him, to take the leap. But trust wasn't something she gave easily. "I'm not perfect," she said finally. "Far from it." "Neither am I," Ethan replied, a small smile tugging at his lips. "But maybe we don't have to be." They left the cafe together as the evening air turned crisp. The city lights flickered to life around them, casting a warm glow over the streets. Ethan walked beside Abby, his hands tucked into his pockets, his presence steady but unobtrusive. For the first time in years, Abby felt a glimmer of something she had thought she'd lost. Possibility. It wasn't about fairy tale endings or sweeping gestures. It was about the quiet moments, the spaces where vulnerability and honesty could exist. As they reached her corner, Ethan paused, his gaze lingering on her. "I meant what I said, Abby. I want to know you. All of you." Abby nodded, her heart pounding. "I'll try, but it's going to take time." "I'm not going anywhere," Ethan said, his smile soft but resolute. Abby watched as he walked away, his figure blending into the city's rhythm. She glanced down at the bracelet still encircling her wrist, the delicate silver catching the light. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope. Not for perfection or an escape from her past, but for a connection that might just be worth the risk, and maybe, just maybe, for the possibility of love. Weeks turned into months, and Abby and Ethan navigated the fragile bridge between their worlds. There were arguments, missteps, and moments of doubt, but there were also late-night conversations, quiet laughter, and an unspoken understanding that grew stronger with time. Ethan didn't save Abby, and she didn't save him. They simply learned how to see each other, the real versions, messy and imperfect and human. And in that, they found something neither of them had expected, the strength to rewrite their own stories together. Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. What began as a reckless wager became a journey of self-discovery, vulnerability, and connection. Ethan and Abby taught us that love isn't found in perfection or wealth, but in the courage to embrace each other's flaws and build something real together. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about the choices we make and the people we overlook, be sure to subscribe to this channel. Your support helps us share more powerful stories like this one. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.